Hello, welcome to the Pick Six podcast. Katie Mox here with Will Brinson. And as you know, this is our All 32 series, the series where we catch you up with insiders and give you the need to know information for every single NFL team ahead of the year. Today, we're covering the Carolina Panthers with senior writer for Panthers.com, Darin Gantt. Darin, you are at training camp right now in the trenches in a dorm, taking some time out for us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, I sorry about the backdrop. What it lacks in space, it makes up for in charm. I promise.
Well, I mean, but you are literally in the trenches too. Are you staying in the dorm for the course of the training camp?
Yeah, I'll be in the dorm. I remember when the Marriott opened in downtown Spartanburg in 2004, when I was at the newspaper, we all had great sport with the people who worked for the team and said, you suckers, we get to stay in a Marriott and get points and drink beer at the end of the night. And now I'm in the dorm. And I think Marty Herney is probably texting me to mock me as we speak. So.
And Marty meanwhile is at the Marriott and you are locked up in that dorm. I mean, it is though, like, I think that's one of the cool things about the way the Panthers do it too, is that it has that very sort of communal sense. Right. I mean, and some teams are still good about it, and some teams have decided to move away from that sort of approach to training camp, but it is a very Southern sort of appeal to it, where everybody kind of rolls into Spartanburg almost like it's like summer camp, right?
Yeah, no doubt. I kind of like the idea of training camp. I was talking to Frank Reich and Dom Capers about the 95 camp the first time they came down here, and they always remember all the inconveniences, the dorm, it was hot and all that kind of stuff, but everybody loves the idea of training camp. Now, is it inconvenient? Yes. There were trucks at Bank of America Stadium packing up a weight room a couple of days ago and moving it 90 miles down the road. That's not the easiest thing for all the ops people and stuff like that. But I do like the theory of coming away to training camp for a couple, 3 weeks, maybe. I mean, Dom and Frank's first camp was about 5 weeks because they played in the Hall of Fame game when they were an expansion team, and they were down here forever, and they were doing 2-a-days, and everybody was sick of each other by the end of that thing. But there is some bonding that happens when you're out on the road, sequestered away from the stuff. I mean, when your choices are walk down the hall in the dorm and talk to your position coach, or go do the things that normal human beings do in their own homes, it gives you a chance to work on more of the football.
So just to follow on that too, like, I don't know that I don't feel like it's being widely talked about maybe as much as it could be, but Dom Capers, the first ever Panthers coach. Like, I mean, I remember, I'm no longer youthful, but I remember as a young person in North Carolina, like when the Panthers the Panthers were here, like, and it was weird because you had some people who love Washington, and you had some, it's like, I guess some people liked Atlanta. There was no, like, the Panthers showed up, and Dom Capers, the inaugural head coach, and then Frank Reich, the first quarterback, and now they're back. And I feel like I don't know if the generational shift with Panthers fans just isn't resonating, but it feels like that's not really being played up as much as it could be. Maybe that's more national.
Well, I don't know. And Dom was kind of a regional appeal. Obviously, he went on, was head coach again in Houston, and had a long stint as coordinator in Green Bay, and has a great career. But I think it speaks to, not only have we been in the nostalgia. And again, if you check out Panthers.com, you'll see our big features from last week on Musim Muhammad and Julius Peppers, who were just added to the Panthers Hall of Honor. So there's been a lot of nostalgia going on. But also, I think when you talk about the lot of them, not just Frank and Dom, look on the other side of the ball, and there's a Jim Caldwell. And I've said all offseason, Jim Caldwell was not a good head coach. Jim Caldwell was a great head coach. He won at Detroit, for God's sakes. And he's here in just kind of this overseeing senior advisor role that's kind of nebulous, and nobody really knows what he does. But it's Jim Caldwell, and it just speaks to the seriousness of this coaching staff. And I think that, I'm sure we'll get into Bryce Young and all the other changes that have been made around here, but that was step one in fixing this thing after going through the Matt Rule years. And, they got a little bounce last year at the end with Steve Wilkes as the interim, but just the depth and talent and competence of this coaching staff is unlike anything they've ever had around here.
Yeah, I mean, I even think, like, and you were answering the question that, like, I think we were going to follow with, which is like, what's the difference? Right? Yeah,
you're one step ahead of the game.
I know. Well, but I mean, I don't want you to have to overstep your bounds as you know, because you work for the team. But like, I am curious, what are the differences? Like, what are some of the differences that people might not understand between what Frank Reich is doing here? Because it reminds me a lot maybe of Doug Peterson and Urban Meyer, not necessarily to that extent, but just a professional and same tree too. But I mean
and not to disparage anyone else. And
exactly.
Best of luck to Matt Rule in Nebraska. Hope him and his friends he took with him all have incredible success there. But it didn't work. Okay, it just didn't work, and he wasn't ready for this kind of job. I think if he had walked into a situation where he had a stable quarterback position and a healthy Cam Newton, maybe all this stuff turns out differently, and maybe Matt Rule's going into his 4th or 5th training camp. But the confluence of having an unsettled quarterback position and a coaching staff that was trying to learn the NFL on the fly. I mean, just look at the amount of experience. There are over 200 years of NFL coaching experience on this staff. There's another 75 years of NFL playing experience on this staff. When you talk about guys like Frank Reich, Josh McCown, Sean Jefferson, James Campen, these were legit NFL players for a long time and legit NFL coaches. And I think it's just night and day. I mean, again, nothing against anybody else who was here, but the difference is obvious.
I mean, Deuce Staley, like it's like you lived through there, and it's like just dudes who played and dudes who were good players and guys who were well-respected coaches. I mean, I think I keep getting asked like, and I have like a lot of family, obviously, are Panthers fans. They're just like, like we really thought like Steve Wilkes was going to work out. It's like, they love Steve Wilkes. Steve Wilkes is great, but you need to understand what Frank Reich is bringing to this. And it is a level of professionalism, and the coaching staff he's put together is just a night and day.
Yeah, and there are 3 guys on this staff who interviewed for the head coaching job. Defensive coordinator Ejiro Vero was one of those guys, along with Jim Caldwell. And, it's just I can't say it enough. It's a deep, competent. I've referred to half jokingly around the building this offseason. Jim Caldwell, to me, is like a competency bomb that has been dropped on this place, and it just washes over everybody, and it's that way throughout the staff. It's not just Jim; it's the lot of them. I mean, having a Chris Tabor coaching special teams, who was a holdover from the previous staff, but just so many good, solid, knowledgeable NFL established assistant coaches around here, and that's going to help because there are a lot of changes and there's a lot of unknown about this football team right now. But if you're going to have a bunch of new parts and a rookie quarterback, these are the kind of people you want shepherding them along.
All right, Darin, let's get down to brass tacks on that rookie quarterback. How does Bryce Young look so far, and is there any chance whatsoever that he isn't the week 1 starter?
He looks tall. He looks very, very tall. I don't think enough has been made of that this offseason. He's practically a giant. No, Bryce he's getting some Bojangles in him. He got his sponsorship deal the other day, so life's good for Bryce Young. There is a 0% chance he is not the starter in week 1. Come on. I mean, that decision was made in March when they traded 2 1s, 2 2s, and DJ Moore for the first pick in the draft. Whoever it was going to be the week 1 starter. He knows the drill. Andy Dalton knows the drill. Everybody, I mean, they may not say it just because you don't have to. And there are some reporters out there who are really bothered by this and think Frank Reich should declare today or something, but there's not really any point in it. I mean, everybody knows what's going on here. Bryce is that guy. He was that guy from the moment they gathered together and started scouting these quarterbacks, and the anticipation is that he is, yes, in fact, going to be the starting quarterback when they open the regular season.
All right, let's take a quick break, and then I'm curious about with DJ Moore gone, what we think about the pass catchers for Bryce Young coming up next. So Adam Thielen, Hayden Hurst, DJ Chark, sort of the big notable additions. Obviously, the more trading DJ Moore is not what you want to do because he was a really good player, but it's what had to be done if you wanted to go up to the number 1 overall pick. Right. Do you feel like those additions in free agency were built around the idea of, we know Bryce Young is going to be the guy when we draft him.
Right.
We want to we know he's got a really high floor, but we want to raise that floor even more. Like, those are not home run attempts. They're like stand up doubles or seeing eye singles, right?
And I think, we were recording our podcast that we do. We call it the Happy Half Hour a couple weeks back during OTAs. And I said, if this offense had a sound effect, it would be like pew, 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 pew. The ball's getting out quick. And it's not necessarily going long, but the ball's getting out quick. That's what Bryce Young's good at. He's good at distributing. He's good at making quick decisions. He's good at improvising, going off script with things. So what they did is insulate him with a lot of those quote unquote safe targets. I mean, Adam Thielen, what's he got, about 15 2-yard touchdowns over the last couple of years? I mean, he's always been a red zone target because he knows how to get open. Hayden Hurst is another one of those. I think Miles Sanders, if you go back to Miles's rookie year in Philadelphia, when some guy named Deuce Staley was his position coach, he caught 50 balls. And I think it was intentional to put those kind of parts around Bryce to allow him to make those quick, easy throws, keep the ball moving, keep things moving along. And in watching him throughout the OTAs, he has been as advertised. He's good at distributing. It's more of a point guard than, oh my gosh, look at Justin Herbert. He just threw the football over the mountain. That's not really what's happening here. So I think a lot of that is by design for Bryce Young. A lot of it is because of the influence of Thomas Brown as offensive coordinator. I mean, he comes out of that house of McVay, and the kind of offense they run. It's not necessarily big home run stuff. It's a lot of change of directions. It's a lot of fool people a little bit with what you're doing pre-snap and that kind of stuff. And I think that's probably, based on what we've seen in June and May through OTAs, that's probably what it's going to look like, especially early on as they get this thing going.
Darin, you bring up Miles Sanders, and it really feels like that addition suddenly gives the Panthers another possible feature back. Do you expect him to get the Lions' share, or rather the Panthers' share of the carries, or will it be somewhat committee?
Are you obliged to do a sound effect when you do that? Should you say?
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
My buddy Zeke and I used to be able to do a pretty good Panthers stadium scoreboard noise, but
no, I don't think this is necessarily a committee in the backfield. I mean, Miles was signed to be the guy. He was the running back who got paid this offseason, and they did that with intent of giving him a lot of carries and throwing the ball his way a good bit, I imagine. So it's not going to be quite a Christian McCaffrey situation, because they do have some other guys. And I mean, if you look at Chuba Hubbard, what he was able to do second half of last year as kind of that second guy along with Deontay Foreman, he's a guy who's got some home run speed. They've got a guy, Raheem Blackshear, who had some pop last year on returns, who is good at catching the football, probably better than Chuba in that regard. And I think that's going to open up some stuff for him. Raheem Blackshear is going to be that name that everybody pops up and notices during preseason, because I imagine he's going to put up big stats in the preseason.
Wow.
If Miles didn't necessarily play in a lot, because he's a talented kid and he's got a little juice in the run game, but he's very good at catching passes. And I think that's something that, could allow him to kind of get in there.
So defensively, yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know, like offensively, I'm a lot more bullish on this Panthers team than, and a lot of that is Frank Reich, man. Like, I know I'm not trying to just pile praise on Frank Reich, but when he got fired, Jim Irsay was bragging about his record in Indianapolis. It's like, you just fired him, dude. What are you doing? And it's just like that competency, that level of putting quarterbacks in position feels like the floor is really like league average offense for the Panthers, right? I mean, is that fair?
It feels that way. And I think, honestly, there are probably more questions for me on the other side of the ball. I mean, we mentioned
that was going to be my follow-up. It's like, what are we looking at on the back end of the secondary? Is like, Jaycee Horn, clear, great talent.
Right.
The injuries you have to deal with, Jeremy Chin, like what specifically to the back end, how do we think that's shaping up?
Well, the good news is, I mean, if you look at the secondary that lost that game in Tampa in week 17 last year to kind of lose a playoff spot, believe it or not, if you look at that secondary, it's not going to look anything like that, because Dante Jackson's back from a torn Achilles. He's moving around well, expected to be able to go on Wednesday. JC told us this morning, and we just wrote about it on Panthers.com, he's 100%. He's ready to go. He's cleared and ready to practice. So he had a little foot thing during the offseason, other foot from his rookie year. And listen, he gets it. He knows that that's the question with him. Everybody's going to wonder about the health. because when he was out with that broken wrist against the Bucs, they went right after the non-Jaycee Horn guy. And he's got the kind of talent to be one of those erasers, one of those guys that the other team just doesn't even throw at. And Dante Jackson's made some plays as a result of it in the last couple of years. So they've got talent there. JC mentioned specifically this morning, bringing in Von Bell to start at safety does two things. It gives you two wise elders back there in the deep middle between him and Xavier Woods, and it allows you to move Jeremy Chin around. Jeremy's always been kind of a guy without a home. What is he? Is he linebacker? Is he safety? Is he this? Is he that? This year, he's a nickel. And probably, I mean, if you go out in base defense, which teams do about, 25, 30% of the time in the NFL, he may not necessarily be a quote-unquote starter, but Jeremy Chin is going to be on the field a bunch and doing a lot of things. Now, by having a Von Bell next to Xavier Woods, now you can move Jeremy up closer to the line of scrimmage, put him in position the way he was as a rookie when he was basically a full, kind of in the mold of Thomas Davis when he came out of Georgia. What is he really? He's number 47. We're not sure what he does. Jeremy's a little like that. He's like a smaller, faster version of Thomas. And I think that as they continue to experiment with those roles, he's not the only guy. I mean, when you shift to a 3-4, they had to go out and sign linemen in bulk just to be able to line up because they didn't have 3-4 defensive linemen. So you go get Deshaun Williams and Shai Tuttle and bring back Henry Anderson, who's a good veteran guy, just to be able to line up there with Derek Brown. But then the linebacking core is so, non-conventional. Brian Burns should be just fine playing outside linebacker in a 3-4. Brian Burns is one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. We know that. We don't know who the other one is on the other side. Is it Marquise Haynes? Is it DJ Johnson, their third-round rookie? Is it somebody they might bring in, a veteran who's out there on the street at this point? I think all those things are possibilities and things they're looking at. So to be determined. Shaq Thompson's a good, solid inside linebacker and should be fine, but the other starter inside is Frankie Louvu. He's not an inside linebacker in a conventional 3-4. He's a guy who can rush the passer and do some different things. He's a little bit like Jeremy Chin in that, what is he? I don't know, but he makes plays when he's out there. So I think Avero's going to be tasked with moving around a lot of parts and trying to experiment just to figure out where to put some of these people and how to do things with them.
And particularly how do they operate in a different scheme? I'm trying to think, because I guess Phil Snow ran do we call it like a 3-3-5 or a whatever, modified 4-3 or whatever the hell you want to call it? When's the last time the Panthers ran a 3-4?
Well, Ron Rivera's last year, David Tepper's.
That's right. They switched. That's right. Ron switched to a 3-4. It's just like, that's when you knew that you're like, Ron's getting fired. Ron in a 3-4. He's toast.
Well, what the heck? It might work. Who knows?
God, that defense is big.
But it goes back. And again, it's good to have Dom Capers here because that's what they ran 95 to 98 when he was the head coach. And, when you had a couple of guys, and that's why I think it's important for them to figure out who that second outside linebacker is because, Will, I don't know if you're old enough to remember this, but in 1995, the Carolina Panthers were very good on defense with Lamar Lathan on one side. When they added Kevin Green on the other side, it became great, and they go to the NFC Championship game in their second year. So that second one is kind of a force multiplier, to use the horrible cliche, but that's what they need to find. And again, whether it's somebody from the outside or Haynes or Johnson or this mix and match bag of misplaced parts that try to gin up a little pressure, we know Brian Burns is going to get his. It's finding some on the other side that's going to be the next big test.
Darin, there's been a lot of changes in the division. How do you feel that the Panthers can contend this year?
Show up, be in the NFC South. That's enough to make you a contender. I last year when you were looking at a team with a losing record going to the playoffs, I was like, every trailer park's got to have an HOA and somebody's got to be president. The bar is low and it's in flux. I suppose if you wanted to name a conventional favorite, it would be New Orleans, just because, Derek Carr's the most established quarterback in the division. Is he, what's the ceiling on New Orleans with Derek Carr? I don't know. I have no idea what's necessarily to expect from Atlanta. I know they've built that thing unconventionally. They've spent a lot of free agent money on interior linemen and used top 10 picks on running backs and tight ends lately. And that's not what most people do, but they've got some talent over there. I mean, if you look at those young skill position players, they ought to be able to move the ball around a little bit, I think. And the Bucks, the Bucks have been in this thing year in and year out with things beyond Tom Brady. They've got enough players down there. Do I think anybody's going to run away with this division? Of course not. Do I think it's possible for somebody to win this division at 9-8? Absolutely. That just seems to be what happens here. So, and from that standpoint, I think a lot of people in Carolina sort of believe, yeah, why not us? I mean, if it's got to be somebody winning 9 games and winning this division, it's reasonable. It's as reasonable to think it's Carolina as anybody else in the division.
So and I'm phrasing this, and I think you'll understand how I'm phrasing this but like if you were pinpointing how many wins you think the Panthers will end up with this season, we're obviously early in it, but like, no?
8 or 9.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
8 or 9 seems like a fair estimate. I mean, again, I just keep going back to the overall competence. The floor has been raised on this team after a couple of 5-win seasons. And then, again, they did bounce late last year, but it just feels like it's better than that and a step closer to the kind of normal that you need to be to contend year in and year out. And, if Frank can develop Bryce Young, if he can keep a couple of these young coaches together, I think if they have success, you're going to see guys like Thomas Brown, guys like Josh McCown, guys like Avero start getting calls for head coaching jobs, I would think. I mean, Josh has already, had interest. It was from Houston, but it's interest nevertheless. And, if he can keep some of these coaches together, I think there's an opportunity to develop something here. There's a stable base. Scott Fitterer wasn't able to find a quarterback the last 3 years, but he did put an offensive line together that you could drop one behind so that it was ready. I mean, it's not ideal. Austin Corbett tearing his ACL in the finale last year, so there's some degree of uncertainty at right guard. But the rest of the line is back intact, and they re-signed Bradley Bozeman to keep all those guys together. So, they kind of created a solid foundation, knowing at some point you were going to go get a quarterback, and then they took the big swing, made the trade, and got Bryce Young.
Humiliating job by me, frankly. I completely botched this, not asking because I assumed I will have friends who listen to this podcast who I'm close with who are NC State fans. They'll be like, you didn't ask about Icky or Chandler Zavala who played together next to each other in college. So before Katie takes us out, just very quickly, Zavala, they seem to really like him coming, like when the behind the scenes calls and why are they diving into the greatest university in America to pluck all these offensive linemen from?
I mean, if you want to protect a quarterback or run the football, you go find the left side of the NC State offensive line, obviously.
Exactly.
Zavala's a big physical dude. Brady Christensen started that job last year, and he's kind of a converted tackle, a different kind of guard. He's a little more athletic, more mobile. We'll see. I mean, if Zavala can get out there on the field and, he's kind of had some minor injuries that's kept him out a little bit of time. He's on PUP list right now. But, with Icky, I think one of the real interesting subplots, he came into the league big and physical, and you knew he was a road grader at left tackle in the run game. You wondered how he was going to be as a pass protector.
Yep.
Well, they played a kind of ball at the end of last year where they were running it 50 times a game, and it was perfect for Icky. I mean, he was right back to what he did in college. I think there's a little more of a challenge for him to develop as a pass protector this season because it is going to be a little more conventional. The ball's going to be coming out quick. They're not going to do a lot of 7-step drop and Bryce stand back there and pat it a couple times before he throws. But Icky needs to take that next step as a pass protector, which he's shown indications of being able to do.
All right. Thank you so much for your time today. Darin, you can you can listen. No, you can read all of his articles on Panthers.com. You could do it all. Everything you need, Panthers.com. Thank you so much for your time today, Darin, coming to us straight from training camp. Stay tuned for more from our All 32 with daily drops in your podcast feed and on YouTube. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to this episode as well. And we will see you next time. Thanks, Darin.
Thanks, Darin.